Our previous speaker mentioned lifelong passions and boring professions, and I'm going to pick up exactly from there. With the story, about 10 years ago, I met a vibrant young lady from Shanghai, let's call her Nora, who was the daughter of two painters. They gave her one piece of career advice: never become an artist. And why her story is interesting to me is because instead of just absent-mindedly nodding her head and then doing the opposite like I would have done when I was young, she actually went on to study finance, became an accountant, and this job paid the bills but left her with a feeling of being aimless and abandoned. She was sitting there in a silent cubicle, wondering why she couldn't be as focused and systematic as the colleagues around her. And why did it happen that when she was trying to start a conversation across this plastic barrier between them, then she met with icy stares? And it wasn't her fault. Actually, like many smart and talented, hardworking people, she listened to advice that was well-intentioned, but sent her, as a Chinese proverb says, climb a tree in search of fish. I'm a management consultant and I meet people in career mismatches every single day. Extroverted, energetic people who are swearing over piles and piles of financial data. Kind-hearted helpers who are absolutely terrified to let others down if they miss an ambitious sales target. These are talented people who keep asking themselves the question, what is wrong with me? And listening to their stories gave me an important realization. I think parents, educators, and bosses, they recreate such vicious circles by giving advice that ignores perhaps the most important element of a successful career, which is personality. Personality is something that defines your thoughts and defines your actions. It is the key to your future success, but also causes your worst frustrations. I would like to invite you for a quick exercise that you have to do a little bit later. When we start the coffee break, start observing people how differently they behave in a situation like this. There will be people who jump into an uninvited conversation with a defenseless stranger, something like this. Hi. Hi. And there will be people who try to get away from them, hiding behind the coffee cup and slowly backing towards the exit. And what you will see there is the most obvious of human personality traits that we call extroversion. Extroverted people are born with a desire to engage in intensive human interaction, whereas people who are introverts, they do engage when they have to or they need to, but most of the time they guard their privacy. And observations like this are thousands of years old. The first known personality classification system was by an ancient Greek doctor called Hippocrates and consisted of 4 so-called temperaments. And although modern psychology rejects his medical hypothesis, but the idea that our personality has something like 4 basic building blocks has weathered the test of time surprisingly well and inspired psychologists like Carl Gustav Jung and Alfred Adler. And then through them, the scientific assessment systems that we use in modern management. I coach high-level executives from Amsterdam to Singapore. Some of them are hopelessly stuck in their own fishless trees. We are sitting there, we are looking at the personality profile. And if Hippocrates could see us from behind the detective mirror, he would recognize his original 4 categories, and I think he would feel quite pleased with himself. So how do you imagine these 4 categories? Imagine that there is a team of advisors in your head. There is a determined salesperson. There is a fun but neurotic entertainer. There is a kind-hearted helper. And there is a reliable but annoying tax advisor. When you have to make an important decision, you can hear these people quarreling inside your head, and usually one of them wins out. And which one defines your character? Modern personality science added color to this equation, and they didn't choose the colors randomly. Through cultures and ages, Red has stood for courage. Yellow has stood for attention. Green has stood for compassion and harmony, and blue for calm and discipline. And in life, there is a red, a yellow, a green and a blue solution for any problem. Imagine for a second that a colleague comes into your office and asks you to proofread a document 10 minutes before the deadline. You decline because you are busy. So, if your colleague is driven by red character, they will try to challenge you into helping them. Whereas if somebody is driven by yellow like myself, they either try to charm you, or they would keep talking and talking and talking and talking until you finally give up. The green style is to guilt you into helping, reminding you of all the favors that you owe the team. And finally, there is the blue style, which is to remind you of some rule or some tradition or some agreement between you which says you must do it. And which of these imaginary colleagues you most resemble says a lot about which one is the personality factor that you usually use to succeed in life. The problem is that in most communities, advice is packaged in predictably uniform packages, just like some kind of antibiotic that doctors give patients no matter what their problem is. And why is this an issue? Look at education or junior jobs. They have a very serious bias towards the left side of this matrix, which is the task-focused talent. Of course, there are certain variations in cultures. For example, I've noticed that Asian families like pushing young people towards the blue style careers, such as medical profession, finance, or law. In the West, there is a little bit more flexibility towards the red career path, including sales, management, or even athletics. But people who were born with talents on the right side, which is the people-centered side, in almost all cultures, they have to wait until they are old enough to figure it out for themselves, that there are suitable opportunities in liberal arts, in service, or even in entertainment. And disregarding natural diversity for practical reasons has one devastating consequence. People start looking at their own personality as a weakness. There are just as many bright yellows born in Japan as in Brazil. But of course, fun and high energy behavior triggers completely different reactions in Rio than it does in Tokyo. And when your nature clashes with outside expectations, what happens is you start to doubt yourself. Like blaming the shape of your head if your headphones don't fit. And this happened to Nora in my story. The more she tried to repress her creative talent, the more frustrated she became, and eventually she left her profession in finance to figure out what she wants to do with herself. If we can believe labor statistics, half of this audience this afternoon is in a comparable situation, either looking for a job or considering to change a job. But even if you're comfortable in your current employment, you periodically have to rethink who you want to be. And at these times, sometimes you will ask yourself the question, what is wrong with me? I would like to tell you there is nothing wrong with you. What's happening is you're struggling with three very stubborn myths that I find behind most mismatches between passion and profession. The first myth that I want to show you is that to be dispassionate or even disappointed with your job is no big deal. It's just growing up. Essentially, this is the life philosophy of my lorry driver uncle, who could have convinced young Elvis Presley that there was no money in playing music, young Elon Musk that it was impossible to fly a car to space, and of course Steve Jobs that Apple was a stupid name for a company. And the more we hear such voices, the louder they become in our heads, but like many loudspeakers, they often play the wrong message, because advice has a tendency to follow the character and the life situation of the person who gives it. Whereas scientific evidence shows that happy and successful people, they look at their career in the light of their own personality and make adjustments when they need to. Now, if so much advice is misguided, then how do you know who you really are and who you should be? And this brings me to the second myth, that modern life rewards conformity over individuality. And I understand why so many people think that way. It seems that we live our lives to the rhythm of traffic, to the rhythm of work. We do this in buildings that are cloned from each other. And all those things that brought color around us, books and greeting cards and theater shows, they seem to disappear in this little black box that we call a tablet. I think that some people who are one of the thousands of employees in a factory or in an office building could feel no more unique than one confused little pixel in this big screen behind me. But I must assure you that nobody wants you to change your nature the way we change the color of a pixel. The very companies that provide the phones, the screens, the tablets, they use personality systems in order to figure out your desires, your life choices, and your habits. They use advanced brain research to support these 4 personality factors. And they watch you from the cloud. They assess your natural risk tolerance, the size of your social network, your proactiveness, your flexibility. All of these things depend on your personality. So let's see, how can you find out what these tech companies already know about you without lying in a brain scanner? You can observe. After all, this is what they do. They just observe behavior and they draw conclusions about personality. People send out thousands of signs which reveal their personality, and they are very easy to observe, even in your office. Do you have a colleague who sits at the desk and right angles everything on their desk? Their computer, their pen, their sandwich, their phone? And if you're not careful, these people will rearrange your desk as well. Have you noticed that some people come to work dressed for success, while others come in a homey hoodie? The first one is the red style, the second one is the green style. Lunch breaks, they are tremendous opportunities to watch people who are red style. They are ruthlessly efficient, they are multitasking while they are eating. There are people who are driven by their yellow, they are hunting down lunch companions. There are people who just go with the flow, which is the green. And there are always a colleague or another one who has a rule or a schedule or a principle for anything that you can eat or you cannot eat, which is the blue. The more you observe others, the clearer your own colors will become to you and the opportunities that they entail. But to make use of those opportunities, I have to take you to one more, a third myth. A lot of adults I know, from intern to CEO, believe that it's too late for them to change. There is a devastating myth that says that as you stop growing in height, you also become unable to pick up a new skill or adopt to new life circumstances or even learn a new language. I could give you scientific evidence to refute that, but instead I want to see a show of hands. How many of you wants to make life adjustments, lifestyle changes, after you retire? I put up my hand because I want to live differently after I retire. So how many of you want to live a little bit differently then? More than half of the room. Why don't we think that it's too late to change then? I think it's quite ironic. Next time you feel too old to change, visit somebody who has recently retired and did something like signed up for Vietnamese cooking courses or established a coin collecting club. Because talent is like a muscle. It's going to feel sore after a couple of years of neglect, but the more you use it, the more strength and confidence you gain. Like Nora. Years after she quit as an accountant, I met her in a networking club. And she told me she found a perfect way to combine her training in finance with her creative talent. She was working for the marketing department of a top sports brand. Now, I'm not saying you have to quit your job if you don't want to, because there are countless ways to combine these 4 colors. And of course, your path is unique and so is mine. But if you find a neglected color in your personality, please try to rewrite your job description if you can. Or if you cannot, at least make adjustments in your daily routine. You certainly can do that. Maybe what will happen to you is that you will discover a creative streak in an otherwise quite systematic and boring job, like Nora did and like our previous speaker did. Or maybe you are going to be the organizing force behind a messy team of innovators. In either case, it's possible and it's important to let your true color guide you from passion to profession. Thank you very much.